Mm. Priya, I think it's not a question of going astray or not going astray. There are certain
Yes, sir.
observations about what could be considered design at even a schematic stage. In the world, we stand as bodies. Bodies have got legs and arms, and they have a front, they have a right, and they have a left, they have a back. There is a down and there is an up. The process of design tries to situate all kinds of bodies in a physical reality. It is not merely an organizational diagram, nor is it a, a statement of intentions alone. So both of these are included. There must be in any design a sense of how it relates to the material conditions of being humans on earth amongst many kinds of living forms and insentient forms. That means, for example, that if I take a simple question like how long will it take me to walk from the stadium up to the river, then each one of us should be able to say that in fairly reasonable terms. If I was also to think about the flow of water, then I would need to know what is the difference in level between the bed of the river or the edge of the river and the place near the stadium or near the India Gate. These are now available in things like Google Earth. So we have now new tools which allow us to do this. So phenomena of nature, such as the flow of water, structure space. And it is the structuring of space both in section as well as in plan. Now you have relatively a very, very flat land with a very minor slope. So your water is going to go all over the place and is going to remain in pools, for example, and so on. So there are conditions to which every one of the set of design ideas in schematic terms will respond while carrying their own notions of what more or what better could be the existences in that world. So I think um, looking at almost what is space. And 2 or 3 days ago, I was talking to some students in Rajkot, and I said, it is distance and direction. And the directionality of things is a measure of, of relationship. That means if I face you face to face versus I glance at you sideways or I hold my posture in a certain way, in every case, the space that comes into existence is a different kind of space. And we have seen on the central vista the space of direct confrontation. Whereas we are trying to find a different modality of space which happens through the glancing, the moving, the walking, and so on, but it nevertheless has direction. It nevertheless has scale or dimension. When these two are taken into account, you start getting what might be called structure. There is a structure in even a patch of grass or a forest. It is not that nature is unstructured. And I think this search for structure is the most exciting part of design. And perhaps because there are so many ideas that everybody had to include, and especially they are unusual ideas for the work of an architect. Normally, we will have certain functions and we will try to relate to them in certain ways. But here, there is a different model. Yet, the skill of the architect to keep the scale of the body in mind, to keep the scale of the tree in mind, to keep the scale of vista, of recognizable faces versus faraway faces, and keep direction in mind would lead to a different kind of structure to the space. And this is what is necessary to do. I observed, for example, some of the sections that were drawn. The line of the ground was so loose as to merely be a kind of a jelly-like material. And I would have expected, or I would hope, that that line is something which is generated by your feel for the land as it is. Even if you have not been to Delhi, having seen buildings of Delhi, having seen the other things of that place, that feel can certainly develop. So this stage requires us to have embodied thought rather than abstract thought. And I think this is where the gap is. I wouldn't say astray. I think the direction is fine. But I would say that it doesn't take into account this extremely important aspect of our existence on Earth. Amongst other creatures and amongst geologies. Yet it is all our perception of the world is connected to this, our body. I think this has to come through in the manner in which even how the drawing happens. Then whether it becomes a building or it is simply a berm which slows the water, they are still works of architecture. Whether it is a tree around which the roots make a space and the branches make a space. That too is architecture. And I think this search for an architecting of this space, distinct from the architecting that has happened in the other place, that place of which we never talk now, because we think that that is a inhuman land. Right? Um, so that is why throughout the studio, we have emphasized the sense of relationship and material action one upon the other. Water on land, plant on insect, and so on, and human with other humans. But all of them finally come to gauging distances and directions. That's what I sense here as a possible further step. I'm sorry to have sort of dumbed down the entire book. I would not like to be that person who is so oppressively uh, quietening down the class. No, I want to be part of you. So please speak. And I might be wrong at some point also. That also I'm willing to think from another angle also.
So I'm wondering, because the participants have done so well up till now, that there is perhaps a clear understanding of how we were moving on this journey together. And at this point, uh, is there an expectation that you feel the burden of, that is somehow not met with a clear way of moving forward in your mind? In the sense that, do you find that you're being asked to do something which you're no longer clear about? Or has our language suddenly shifted so that you are unable to now hold on to the words as dearly or as clearly as you could in the previous stages? So in our description of the introduction of the word material, for example, are you sensing confusion? Or in the sense of the word space, are you now hesitating to bring back your previous understandings of space into the whole milieu of words? I know that for some groups, we have kind of almost asked you to hold back on reacting almost like urban designers or architects would on a site, in terms of a master planning, site selection, saying the problems of arteries and problems of this and that. And we've been asking you to focus on the relationships of people with animals, people with people, and the relationships of practices within the city, and thinking on the core values a little bit more before you jumped in as architects. So is there is there some kind of um, a place from where you're not able to proceed, that you feel that there's a jump here?
Not that we have abandoned something that we began with, and now we are asking for something completely new.
So my observation is that the word hesitation, I would say, is quite accurate. It seems like there is a huge amount of hesitation to engage with the site because of whatever the way it has been set up, or the way the lectures have happened, or and the amount of sensitivity that was picked up through all that has somehow created this guilt of, if we engage, we will spoil what is there, or it is not what we do. Structuring is not what we do. Leave it the way it is, do something minimal. And I see that hesitation coming from a place which was sensitive to begin with, which turned to guilt, and then which is now like, I'm not going to touch anything, and sort of this is sort of my observation with the conversations I've been having.
Mm.
It would be really good if some students also speak up as to what your movement was through the studio up till this point, and is some of what we are saying resonate with what you guys have been going through, or?
Well, I'll talk about our group. I mean, based on yesterday's discussion, we thought we were going on the right track. But I guess like we hadn't begun to think of like specifics in terms of like dimensions or exact sort of like we had this general idea, and yesterday the discussion was also rather like we were going through like the core ideas with you, and there wasn't any talk of specifics per se. So I don't think like we knew to expect, I mean, we didn't know that today we kind of had to put across those specifics in quite as much detail as you were expecting, I guess.
Is it a question of detail? Sorry, Gayatri was saying something.
No, I was about to say the same thing.
I think I'm talking about an orientation and not the level of detail. Something that you feel in your bones as a body. That sense has to come through into the drawing. That whatever are the tools with which we make, for example, let me put it another way. Suppose I have two dogs. One is a large dog and one is a tiny dog. And the large dog is a bully. And when I give the food, I have to make sure that the small dog also gets some. Huh? So I will not say that it will happen if, in that case, even if my sympathy for life as a totality is still there, I will still have some kind of ways of creating the space of the small dog, if I might put it that way. The space of the small dog and the space of the big dog. That's a kind of simile which might somehow work. But I also often think of that there are things on this side. There is the fort, for example. And every time my pencil is going, does it not stub its toe on that fort? Does not the fort radiate directions into the space? So that unless I wipe out the fort, there is already a structure of space there, which I will have to take into account at least, even if I change it. It is like in a language, words have obtained a certain density and a certain meaningfulness. And when I speak language, I speak from that language. I don't speak by allowing words to come together in a manner in which they do not respect the structure of language. Even if I am a poet, I will do it with great care. So the structure of received space consists of the sun, it consists of water, it consists of topography, it consists of pre-existent phenomena, and it consists of what all will come there. And that is the struggle of the designer. That she tries to sense the magnitudes and the directions of the interactions. Even if the designer decides that she will not interfere and she will simply let there be an emerging order, there will still be the recognition of the pre-existent structure. You understand? Even the water will be not able to flow over the Purana Kiln. It will go around. Huh? So now, in the work, given all of this, it will be necessary to bring about a sense of an emergence of a new reality by working with the template given by the existing reality and some adjustment to that where you feel it is necessary. And in that, all these concepts that you have thought about, all the things that you want to bring as core values can certainly come even within that. So the detail is something which is, once you got the basics, then you work the details. The basics have to have a sattva, what we call in Gujarati. They have to have a sensing of reality. Yes, Gayatri, sorry.
No, sorry for I thought you were done. If I can put it a little more literally, what the discussion that we had yesterday was, the whole direction of the discussion was that you guys were, your thoughts, your intentions, and everything were going in the right direction. What we were discussing is how to portray it in such a way that it doesn't get lost in your drawing, right? Now really look at the map that you showed us yesterday and the map that you've shown us today. You know, do you really think there is a difference in character? It's the same thing. You guys have just changed the looks of it. You know, the representation of your thought hasn't come across in this map. You know what I'm saying? It's if I can just let me share some very stupid things. Like, see, you wanted earthworms, butterflies, all these things as karigars. Have you really thought about really how they will dig? They will make certain patterns. It's not random, the patterns that they will make. Then in section, what will happen? It's just random, that photographs that I just picked out now. Or, how they will coexist with other turnips or things like that. It's not random stamping of butterflies on places. That doesn't show. It has to show in your space how their presence has impacted the soil or impacted the river, water, whatever. I'm just getting, or, there's so many studies have happened as to why butterflies move a certain way, or why do bees move like this? You don't have to get into detail of this sort, but it has to show up that if you are saying that these are the karigars we are talking about, then this is how they have occupied the site. That has to show on the site. It can't have no implications on the site. That's what we are talking about.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much. Much clearer now as to what you're talking about.
So I would like to talk about in Kotla situation. I think like there is definitely some confusion because I don't know, at least for my situation, I feel like as like we are trying to unlearn the way that we have always been designing in architecture. So we've got into a point where we have to decide how to start actually designing. And it seems like if we don't want to take the usual path, but then we don't know how to take the other one or something like this. So I feel like in that point, I agree with what Vicky said, that we are hesitating, but still because we feel like, okay, we have to put a program, but and materiality, and we're trying to show the site and everything, but still like we don't know how deep it has to be, because then we say like, okay, we have to actually design. No, I mean like the building or something, and it's a no. So then we are like sort of in a limbo between those two steps, and I think that's where we are like sort of stuck. Yeah.
And I
I'm
think to add on to that, I think we're kind of ambiguous as to how much our involvement should be at this stage. Also, a little bit as far as I can tell.
No,
Uh,
can you say some more about that?
no, I think, yeah. So from what I can tell, we got a certain set of core values, and while dissecting them or trying to understand them and trying to interpret them, all that was fine. But when it came to actually doing things on the site, I think we are kind of unclear as to how much our involvement in that doing should be at this stage.
Yeah, it's true, because I
Or
think also
rather, or to put it more literally, I think that I personally, I don't think I am clear as to what schematics mean in this context.
Yeah. Mea culpa. Huh? That's a vague word. You are right. Absolutely right. But then you are also called a karigar. Who is a maker? And a maker is rather direct in making. If you see what I mean. Andrea, before you became an architect, were you doing anything? I mean, did you ever arrange your room, huh, Andrea?
Huh.
Or
Yes, yes.
did you in a party, did you position yourself in a certain way? Ever?
Huh.
Have kept away from people who you didn't like and moved closer to those who you liked and looked at them in a certain way and didn't look at the others. Did you never do that? Huh?
Huh.
And that's exactly what is design, schematic or otherwise. It is about how do I relate to other things, or how do things relate to each other? How far apart? What do they look at? Do they allow the water to pass by, or do they stop the water, etc., etc., etc.? And it's something that all humans know. So we want that you get to the uh, unadorned human response from which an architecture may emerge, will probably emerge. Best architecture evolves out of a human response. No? Right, wrong, Andrea.
No, I think I agree.
Mm. And Niveditha, when you say how much to be involved, most of us pour ourselves. Yeah, all of you have done. You have not restrained and said, I will give this much and not anymore. In that, I have no complaint. And I think continue to let pour. If the next group finds it that they have to do something to it, let them. But you come out. I'm not saying that make life so difficult for them and do such controlling things that they cannot do anything. But I mean, in a friendly way, take the dish that came to you, eat one samosa and pass it on. There are still some more samosas in the plate. No, I find these earthy analogies with no architectural language in them at all to be things that can wake us up. And today's time is such that we need to be woken up. And we make a new architecture. You see what happens by the time this studio ends. There will be an architecture. By that, people who know architecture will suddenly feel that they have gone wrong. That is what the aim is. But it may not be building, for sure. It may be something completely different. But it will be a, a space, a place which has found relationships of adjustment, relationships of correlation, relationships of working together, and found a kind of dynamic equilibrium within itself. Dynamic equilibrium requires structure. Am I making sense? Niveditha?
Yes, yes, I understand.
I think in a way the struggle that you guys are talking about is the struggle of the studio. We are trying to break away from the usual perception of architecture, but we are in the end trying to make a new architecture. We are not denying that the existence of such a discipline, you know. and there is a lot of confusion. A lot of people have written to me about how real do we go, like this whole perception of reality. There is this misunderstanding that when we talk about plants, animals, water, all the lectures, myths, that it's not something that is dealing with reality. No, we are only finding ways to engage with reality so that it doesn't become oppressive or authoritative or whatever else. It doesn't mean that we are not dealing with what is there in front of us, because then that there is no point.
Another way of saying it is that we have found that the greater reality is of all existence, within which human realities play out. And it is the greater reality which ought to have affected many things that we do, but in recent times has not done so. And we are trying to find a way of taking into account the greater reality of all of nature, of time. Shilpa, good to see you back.
No, sir. It's good to be back finally.
Yes. Everything okay now?
Yes, yes. She's discharged and home, at home for resting.
Also, I've also seen within each group, there are beautiful ideas. There are ideas which are really potent and promising. And as a seed, there is enough for it to kind of become something very, very interesting. And I think there is in that hesitation, the hesitation is also an intimidating idea of dealing or having to deal with the entire site plan. And I think that is something that perhaps is a little bit of a mental block maybe, or because it's a urban level plan, which is from Professor Chai was asking how long it will take for you to walk down from, let's say, the stadium to the river. And if it takes you half an hour to walk down, how many sites like this have you actually dealt with, where it has taken you half an hour to walk down from one end to the other? So I think that whole idea of having to deal with that large space with so many diverse elements within is also kind of intimidating, perhaps. But the ideas that have come up in your own works, so that if an idea comes up of a floating platform, say, or an idea comes up of a homeless shelter under the bridge, say, I think these are ideas that can be really built upon if you place yourself in the shoes of the person who's making it, with the tools that they are making it, with the community of people who kind of come and help make it, with other people who are getting affected by that making and come and there's a negotiation of sorts that happens. And once you consider all of this, that making has a presence on the site. It has a material reality on the site, and it has an understanding of the site which is very intimate. And if you progress with even small parcels at a time, I think you can actually deal with it in a manner that is quite feasible or doable.
The problem is, until you put it in front of us and commit to it, we will not be able to tell more than what we are telling now. It will be as vague as it is.
No, I think Sudipta said something not vague. Let's put it
yes.
this way. Let's take it like this. That in addition to the thinking about the whole, vignettes, you know what are vignettes? Small glimpses. So each participant say in that group there are 6, 7, 8. They take two places and they simply make a sketch of what happens there. Within keeping in mind the overall plan, but doing something definite there and bringing it back to the plan. And this movement to and fro between scales is something which is an essential part of the design imagination. That you even just imagine you're planning anything, or you're going to do some, let's say there's going to be a big party that you want to arrange. You will think of, oh, what kind of dishes which will we have? And at the other end, you'll be thinking, oh, how many people will there be? And how big will be the vessels in which we'll have to make? And then you'll again be going down to, will they eat with their hands or spoons? And all of that will keep on fluctuating. And that is a marvelous human capacity to play between the intimate and the vast. And every design that does that will come out stronger. I think you have to put that in motion.
I think this word astray is also coming up too often. And I don't think there was a single idea which was astray there, according to me. I think they're all on point. They are with good direction. And so the alter ego is already forming. We just have to find a good expression for it and go have a depth of understanding to detail it further. Yeah. And it is not a matter of doing a 1:50 or anything. It's just the depth of understanding. You need to go that one more layer to express that alter ego better. So, and we were actually quite thrilled by the way the core values came out with so much confidence, with poetry and whatnot. And that's the alter ego for you. And keep that confidence, because we don't see anything astray here at all. And if there is something there, we would speak up, and we will be checks for each other. We will bounce each other off, and you will know what is wrong. And in that sense, we are mirrors for each other. We will show you what it is, or we'll see the way you're doing it. It's also a mirror for us. So get on with it and engage fully. Don't be hesitant about what you're doing.
Could I ask one thing? Like now, see, we were so strong about our core values because we were very, very strong about what we wanted and everything. We are also pretty much strong about okay, as Karigars, we want to do this, we want to do that to make it to a material real sense. What is happening, where I feel it's getting lost for at least us, is translating to it, getting passed on to somebody else, and you know what it gets. So I felt that if I take that something thing, and if I'm continuing throughout the 15 days with that gesto onto it, maybe we would be able to really come up with something to this. But every 2 days that, okay, there is a submission. And every 2 days, okay, we are trying to put things together in a presentation. It's like and across time zones, it's like just getting lost in that thing, at least for us. So if we continue...
On the 19th. We can meet on the 19th.
No, sir. We want to meet, but we want to have a continuity.
Why?
We want to have a continuity in the thought.
Another mind comes, and then that mind comes and does things, and you will get disturbed.
Okay, fair enough. Something. This was what I wanted to ask, whether if it's like that way, because when we started off strongly and where we got lost is in this translation is what we felt. That's where, and a lot of abstract things got at least coming into the thing wherein everything was okay, kind of that idea that was kind of sort of got perpetuated somewhere, and which is really not okay, which I understand right now.
But I don't know if I would say it like that. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't think if I would put it like that, because I think we got really engaged to the core values of the team that we got.
Yes.
I would say like we took some time to understand them and to criticize them and like to actually try to get clear about it. I think one of the things that I feel me Andrea I'm not so clear about is the site. I mean I know like from names where everything is. I just don't feel the land. Like I don't feel yeah, I don't feel the site exactly. Like, I mean, I've gone through the photos a lot. I've gone to the explanation of the site and everything, but there are so many things that have to be involved, like the talks, and they were talking about all this meaning of the Yamuna and everything, and like when we try to put it in a project, it just feels really confusing. I mean, I don't think that it's impossible. I just feel that maybe the way that I will try to do it from now on is just like to take a big step, and then if it's wrong, I'll just take a step back or something like that. Yeah, I don't know.
I'd also just like to add, I don't think I agree with you, Priya. I feel like the whole exchange of program and brief from group to group kind of adds to it, because the brief that we
I didn't.
is now as much ours as the previous groups, and I think we're all very committed to it now. But I think like where our shortcoming was, I think, was translating our ideas visually, which I mean now we've understood, so I think we'll take another crack at it. But this is just our group, so I mean, you guys.
So I did not mean wherein we did not take the core values literally. We kind of deliberated across 2 days to go back to the core value and rewrite it and critique it and look at it and everything. We spent a lot of time into it, but translating it back to the site was expected exactly on this exercise did not get through to us very clearly, you know, to draw it on the site, literally to say that, okay, how this core value and this material is drawn on this site.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe we just did it too abstract or too vague. Maybe that's what I would say. I would
हाँ
not.
ठीक है. तो अभी तो you know, we have reached a point, and we have reached a wonderful point. So the first thing I will ask you is to put aside any sense of being inadequate. Any sense. You have proved more than adequate. For last, even yesterday, I have been saying to people, I haven't found this much thought and this depth of thought going on. And so you have picked up really a very difficult thing to do. You all have a sensitivity which is driving you. So put away everybody at some point will do something and feel stupid about it, or feel that अरे ये क्या कर दिया. तो ये होता है, इसमें कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है. आप लोग कोई, you are not the first ones to have done it. Each one of us has done it. Continue to do it and continue next day to feel अरे क्या यार सोचा होता तो, हाँ, तो सब होता है. Now my sense is pick it up, take a little time more, and we will have to find out what everybody feels about it and bring it to that embodied understanding. Yeah. And then we can offer it. ना वो ऑफरिंग होता है, जैसे नहीं थाली बना के जाते हो. हाँ, so you are going to offer it, and with gratitude the others are going to eat it with gratitude. One of the things in this is that in design there is hardly ever any gratitude. And it is one of the finest human emotions to feel that, अरे ये सब मिला मुझे. हाँ? सूरज हर दिन निकलता है, बारिश आता है. Every day I am continue to be amazed and grateful that even to design, if it happens, then you will expand. So now, right now, the rain did not fall well. Tomorrow it will fall. होता भी है ऐसा. So I won't be too shaken up. Only I will say, we must each speak with full openness as to क्या हुआ और क्या आगे होना है. क्या? Andrea and all, I'm sorry, I'm
Sudipto's translating.
Hindi quite a lot. By the time we end, all three of them will learn Hindi, I think, Geraldine and Anna and Andrea. They will have
there are more non-Hindi speakers.
Yes, there are. Oh, yes, of course. But they get a sense of it by the very sound of the thing. Because they वो विघ्नेश बैठा है उधर. Praveen है. Praveen also is smiling. देखो, he's always smiling. So.
To your point, I've been talking about Leonardo da Vinci's sketches also in other groups.
Yes.
And this whole question about whether a design is wrong or right is a frivolous one, according to me. Did all the sketches that Leonardo da Vinci made, did they work? Did they fly? All the flying machines? None of them worked. So his work is wrong? What it shows is an understanding of aeronautics, a deep understanding of hydraulics, when most of the laws were not even put down, you know. And that is what we require. Like when Professor Chaya says there is an understanding of water moves on land, that is the depth of understanding one needs, not the fact that it actually work. Or, sorry, sir. Oh, thought you said something. Yeah. So yeah. So then forget this wrong or right, and I think get that level of understanding of how it moves, or how trees grow, or how worms move through the earth, or.
Can I say something? Can I be heard?
Yes.
You know, Professor Chaya, when you were saying that you're speaking too much Hindi and we don't understand, this is what I've thought about the core values. You know, that it's as if someone is speaking their own language and we are there to interpret it, but we're not sure what they're saying. And it's this way that I feel much about architecture is similar to music and dance. And that what we do as architects is almost like dance. We listen to music and the body becomes the machine for interpreting it. And we know how we want to interpret it. But some people are more shy to not dance, or some people are just out there and they just do it. I think it is listening to the music of the core values and just letting go and dancing at whichever way that you do, in whatever style. And perhaps the music is never in the language that you understand, but there's some rhythm to it that you can understand, something that your body knows it's trying to say.
Yeah. That is why Octavio Paz was able to write poetry in India of the intensity that caught Indian life. And he was also able to feel the pain of the students who were shot in Mexico and gave up his ambassadorship. He resigned. So that is the listening to that rhythm. And he must have felt for others. He must have felt for Africa. He must have felt for China. He must have felt for all. And I think the core values are values which are irrespective of language. As you say, they are the rhythm of existence which you tried to catch. But now that has to be danced. And dance requires a body, it requires the ground, it requires the air. And maybe other people also. Huh? Let's look at what is a wall. I would like to now make it little more, because the overall sense must have been that we have no belief in architecture anymore. That architecture is a criminal activity which needs to be immediately stopped. No? That must have been the sense that came up in the studio. So let us ask, what is a column and what is a wall? A column is like me, that it stands. And it has a sense of being something like me. And when it stands apart at regular distances, it tends to say something about a larger order to which it is responding. But when it happens at random distances, it achieves a playfulness of the same kind as my body. What is a wall or what is a floor? A wall can be a way of preventing communication or movement, but it is also a support to the notion of place. And same with the floor and maybe with the roof. All of these, just as birds use grasses to make nests and creatures burrow into the ground, humans flatten it. They create a screen so that my body is not subjected to your gaze, or that my noise does not bother you, and so on, just as the birds do. Suppose we think of us architects as kind of birds with the tools of smoothing, pinpointing, or standing, and making realms. These are the tools. Not that in your design they will come. All I am saying is that just because somebody has used this kind of features or these kind of tools in a way in which creates a hateful place, a place of oppression, doesn't mean that those things themselves have lost their sanctity. Just because the word "the" has been used by Hitler doesn't mean that nobody else can now use the word "the" or red or green. or there cannot be verbs anymore, and there can't be central structure of subject, verb, predicate. No, those will still remain. So, in this place, we are not denying the human's desire to make something last a little longer. Humans have such desires. You also have. It is the terror of time exists for all humans. And all the expressions are the tools of overcoming the terror of time. This morning the poet spoke about that, about how the world is able to abolish the dissolving character of time, which dissolves the past, which dissolves histories. And he said, the rhythmic poem will be remembered for ages. So in the same way, I think architecture also is a play of this kind. Now this is again, now I'm saying this with great fear, because again it becomes very, very large. I don't call it abstract, I call it large, very complex or very, very difficult to grasp. So it is only in the doing that we grasp. And in doing, we have to be like children. The child is the most unfearless thinker. And we have to be there. Then bring the various finenesses afterwards. Yeah, but the basics have to be there.
It's quite interesting the way that the child just continues to say, I need, and says, I want this toy, and I also want that toy. I want all the toys. And it's, sometimes we have to say as adults that, no, we can't have one thing or another. But you see, when you can have everything, and when you can have as close to everything as possible, both light, darkness, tall, small, wide, short, as much as you can put in everything that we consider to be opposites, the more poetic your architecture gets, or the more senseless it gets. I think also this idea of timelessness is something that I find reading poetry. Poetry is prose without time. No, it's how we sit in a room with a poem forever, and we can just feel forever. And it's quite interesting what you're saying, sir.
The child is a very strange creature. It thinks it wants everything, but it quickly gives them up. It loses interest because something next becomes more interesting. So while some characteristics of the child are very, very useful, we can't bring the entire child. You can't in any case. Yeah. But that fearlessness and that directness, I think that directness is what one is referring to. Of this, there. So let me try that. But if not, then let me try that. So what shall we do? You know, in that jungle book, the old jungle book, the three vultures are sitting on a tree. And from time to time, they're very bored because they can't see any body to go and eat. So what shall we do now? What shall we do? was what they kept on saying. I hope we are not vultures, huh? Vignesh.
Sir, I'm Kalia the crow.
I know that is there.
So have we given up individual desires in this process? I just want to kind of raise this issue. Say somebody wants to convert Delhi into a forest, into a jungle. And I want to do it. I want to kind of take away this entire bus stop area, this area around the Pragati Maidan, just give it up to the forest. That's a desire. It's an individual desire. And we are saying no. None of us have done it. We have not gone ahead and done it. So which means that we have not given in to individual desires. What are the desires that we are giving into? And which are the ones we are holding on to? There is your core value document. The core value document is the music, as Anna put it. But there is there an urge to do something, whether it's dance or something else? How do you identify what is that urge inside? I'm sorry, am I making no sense at all?
No, let me try to understand what you're saying. That what you said is that as a group, we came to a certain agreement that yes, this is important, let's do it. Yeah? But we did not erase everything else. Therefore, we held our desire in check and we respected the desires of the past, of the future, of other creatures, other modes of life, etc. Yeah? And the core values document that we got, that we may have seen in two ways. One, yes, and the other, what in music we call contrapuntal. So if the one is dancing dum, 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 the other does tick, tick. So it will become dum, tick, dum, tick. Like it plays, it puts his feet in between. So that, yeah, of course, that thing is there, but I also wish to move like this. And there, the core value document becomes double-voiced or 10-voiced document rather than a single-voiced document. And I think this is something very interesting. Very early on in the studio, I had sent you Stravinsky's music and also the lectures given by this great composer. Anyway, they are there in the library. And,
TMK.
yeah,
Bernstein.
no, Bernstein. And the idea of contrapuntal movement is a very interesting idea. You can walk in step with somebody, or you can move in half rhythm, or And in our tabla traditions, they do amazing things. Like in a 16-beat cycle, they will fit 7. And 16 sevens are how many? You know, if you want to calculate, it is like horrible. But they do it with their bodies. And everyone does it in the way they dance actually, or in the way they move their bodies in relation to the tune. And I think this is something which is happening in the group level, this contrapuntal movement. I can sense it in all the groups. That has to now find a concrete form. By concrete, we don't mean RCC. Embodied form. Vignesh, you remember Mind Well?
Mind well.
M15 is not a structural concrete.
So this other analogy that you used to give also comes to mind. Setting out core values, almost like telling, oh, there is a balanced food in diet and you need these much carbohydrates and these many proteins and this much sugar is bad for you and all that is one side. But then when you're hungry and you have to make food, how do you make a recipe or how do you prepare for it? And what is finally taste is completely different than what we require as human beings. Or there is a generality and a universality to it. Like what Anna was, you were telling to Anna, that anywhere you go, carbohydrate is going to be carbohydrate in the world. Protein is going to be protein. But food is so varied and different everywhere. And everyone makes it differently. Every family makes it differently. And every condition is different. Ingredients are different. Although the final core value can be the same. So if you look at a dish from Japan and a dish from India somewhere, you can still say this has these many carbohydrates and protein. You can get all those metrics right, but then the food will be completely different. So in this stage of the Karikas, we need to make that food. You need to take material, engage with it, and it has to have taste. It can't be at the end of the day saying that I put these much carbohydrates together with this much protein, and this is you can't eat that. You can savor it maybe intellectually, but there is no engagement there. So I thought that was a beautiful analogy that you used to give.
So how do we plan the next 7 days? The question that we need to...
Let's think of 2 days rather than 7.
Okay.
I suggest that the groups can continue to work and develop the ideas that they have begun. By, let's say, today is Friday, let them get a night's sleep today, and Saturday and maybe Sunday evening, up to Sunday evening, then they post it and go to sleep. And on Monday we have a fresh. What do you think? Tomorrow we have one talk in the evening, but otherwise you can take it and develop it more, what you have. Do you think, Sudipto, that makes sense?
Yeah.
We'll have to see rest of 5 days में क्या होता है वो बाद में देखते हैं. हाँ.
In one of the groups, I've almost, because they seem to be struggling with the idea of how to get into the exercise. So I even suggested and they have actually worked with that suggestion to look at the next stage, to look at the stage of the users.
Yeah.
And I said, why don't you role play? And you become this, you become that, you become this. And now you have to figure out how you will make your living here. You pick a place in this zone where you think you can make a living, and you start operating. But in your operation, you have to consider the other 4 or 5 or 6 people who are also operating. Enrich your operations or your workings or your habitation with the engagement of the others. So that was one of the ways of moving forward, and I thought that it had some promising beginnings.
Yeah, we can even think about collapsing that stage. That already, I think already people are thinking about the users.
Yeah.
I mean, no architect can be without that, no? No self-respecting architect should be allowed to. There are large practices which are working on that premise, but other than that, so if we say that that stage will become unnecessary, and we will proceed into simply offering it back to the original owners. It may be so. Let's keep it open for a while. What do you think, Divya?
I think we're already like kind of taking that direction, our group, because uh, we took different stakes in the start, and at every stage, once all of us come together, we discuss from different point of views.
But that is not the same as somebody else doing it on a design that you give them. That's actually, it would have been a wonderful stage if we could do even a 1 hour of it. Even if we do it as just a play acting thing, it's a useful thing to take away our arrogance. Varki used to say that designer needs to have an ego. Otherwise, she can't do anything. And in Ayurveda also we say that you hold the body together because of ahankar. And the moment ahankar is not there, the body falls apart. Ahankar means I-ness. I-ness. You have got to have a sense of I-ness. But then that I-ness also has to be challenged. So now to play a little bit of punning, but it's not purely pun. In the morning, he talked about the aina or the mirror as something which both reveals and hides, because it hides what is behind it. It reveals what is in front of it. And that eye is like that. And what behind wali cheez tabhi hoti hai when somebody shatters the mirror. And Ghalibet said that aina ko tod do. So it was a very interesting chain of thoughts that came in. So yes, good that you've been doing that, but somebody else doing it to your design is a game altogether, different game. Others, Sahana, what do you feel? Let's talk
Uh,
to people, Yes. Yeah, yeah. Tell.
So I think I would add to what Divya was saying that we're kind of in the middle of both of those stages. So it was getting a little difficult to hold ourselves back from completely getting into design or completely addressing the users. So I think it would be nice if this collapse stage happened a bit, because I think it would kind of bind our doubts also together and get it more.
Only one caution, that don't completely change now everything that you have done. There is great value in what you have done. It has to be put together in a more perceptible sense. Yeah. The user should not come and break what you have, the sandcastle that you have made. They should not kick it. So don't allow that to happen. It's very important that some things you develop. Like if you are cooking and I come and tell you, "Arey, put some chili in it," then you'll say, "Okay, then you make the dish. Why are you coming and telling me?" No, will you not do that? Huh? So now, stage by stage, maintain the sanctity of what you have done. I think that is very important. So, yes, good that you have thought about the users, but whatever you have done, just bring it to a point where it takes into consideration scale, direction, nature of site, etc. You understand? Don't give it up. Don't give it up.
I'm going to pick out other people. Rana, what do you think?
Yeah.
I think we were working on like some of the points that were discussed over here, like, and we have tried and incorporated, because when we were looking, when we had a discussion yesterday with Figgy, and when we are looking at site, we were considering the parts where the interventions that we were thinking of, that where should it be placed and why it should be there particularly. And like what also like there was a part of user group, which like there was a part where we had to thought about a user group, so we were also including that particular part in it, but not totally like how it is totally getting adapted, but some parts of how it gets adapted and things, because that is what was helping us to define the spaces that we were making. And and also uh, uh, like when we were placing on site, we were thinking that like if we had this idea of bringing the water from the river like inside this whole uh, the inside the site itself. So like we went back and we looked at the plans, the speculative plans which were like there of from the Madhvan stock, where it was talking about that particular river which was already there, and then the Purana Killa sitting on it and all such sort of thing. So when we when we considered basically in these pockets, like we were looking at what is in the surrounding and which intervention, like, because what we did was that we basically came up with different sorts of interventions rather than a single thing, and it had different scales to it. And because of that, we had to decide upon that which intervention would go and like sit in which particular part. So like if the power station is there, how would what should be the scale of the intervention that is being done in that part. And that's when we started looking at all of our different scales of intervention which were existing in our ideas. And then we placed it basically in that plan. But we I'm not sure that whether that's the schematic plan that we are talking about and what exactly this word schematic mean. But I think what like like what we were doing is like I was able to relate few of the things which were being talked about over here, and we are still like we were just talking about it, how will we move forward with this and what should be the next step for this. So yeah, that's the case.
Can we perhaps look at each group's drawing and in brief discuss and move to the next group like that? Should we
Yes,
do
sir,
that?
I agree. Yeah. Can we start with yours, Rana, Shreya?
Yeah, I'll just project it. Yeah.
But Rana, don't speak too much. Huh?
I think Shreya can do that, the speaking part.
That's all right.
She will be very crisp in it.
5 minutes here.
I know, sir.
No, it's okay, Rana. You should go for this.
Actually, show of drawing will be good enough because
drawing.
that's what it's supposed to communicate to the next group.
Yes. Yes.
Shreya, you can start, I guess, then I'll open in.
Okay. So these are the core values that we have received, and we're talking about inclusivity. We're talking about life, and I mean all various life forms existing together in basically humans and nature together in all the life systems. So we came up with the whole idea of the tree of life, and basically the tree of life means that everybody is on an equal platform, and then all life forms have an honest dialogue with each other. That's the basic concept that we have. We can run through. And to arrive at this program, we basically looked at the approach of how a Karigar works, how inclusivity can be brought, how can we be grounded in the present scenario, and how can we give the user more power. And then we looked at the core values as well to conceptualize basically unity in biodiversity, how time is cyclic in nature, and how the energy which is taken must be returned back to the continuum. So this is something which is very necessary for us. So if we install something, that goes through a natural process of decay and then comes back again. So then that's that. And then so over here we have the program. So the program basically is a Chaupal. A Chaupal is an open meeting place. For us, we have converted the idea of the Chaupal to this common space where everybody can come and have an honest dialogue, and it is accessible to all life forms. And that's what this is. Yeah. So over here we are trying to, so basically we know that a lot of the nature, I mean, for example, just the example of tree, it's a very visceral feeling that trees are cut, they are used, and energy is transferred. But what if, so our whole idea, the whole conversation that the entire group had with the whole idea of Chaupal, and basically this intervention is to bring back the idea of Therav, that is, a calm cessation of what exists in order to allow natural processes to evolve around and within the Chaupal. And so that's that. Yeah. So then we started working with various combinations. So what we did was, because we were all filled with ideas, so we gave ourselves individual time, and we came up with these. So everything that you see here is not any one person's work. So these are modules which got combined because of their requirements. So for example, one
Rana,
was looking at the substructure.
Can you zoom a little bit, please,
Yeah.
Rana? A little bit more? Yeah, thank you.
So one looks at just the substructure as to how can life be. So yeah, the whole idea was we wanted to create these frames that hold seeds which would germinate. So it's something like, we've discussed this with a lot of instructors as well, and the whole idea of seed bombing. So the installment that we put, the intervention that we put is really sly, and it's very like, it mixes with the urban fabric. But suddenly we have planted these seeds in these frames at various levels, from the substructure to the columns to the plane, through the plinth where they come and they sit, and eventually within time. So each of these boxes has a life cycle from say 0 to 5 years, 0 to 20 years, 0 to 50 years. within these various timelines, these trees or this life is going to grow and the nature is going to take over. The whole idea is that we want to allow things to happen in their natural process. So that's what so these various modules are designed for that kind of an interaction to take place. And it is accessible to all kind of life forms. And by access, I literally mean just access, and for them to use this space completely. So that is the level of user group use that we've really used. We've not determined anything very strongly. Then we looked at the site, and we looked at the city of Delhi. So ideally, we would like this to spread all over the city, but just to focus and to come up with these typologies, we focused on all the purple regions that you're seeing, and the blue region is the lake, and we've tried to connect it back to the river to allow the water to flow in its gradient. And all these purple spaces that you see are various typologies. Where it is extremely dense, we would just make a subsurface kind of intervention. And where we have open spaces, the structure would be we would have more of the superstructure, and we would there would be more interaction of such. So the various modules have been designed keeping in mind the site, the various opportunities the site gives us. So yeah, there's something, if anyone wants to pitch in from the group, please do so. Yeah.
No, I think it's on point. And then
and the idea is that we don't create isolated spots, that they all are, like if we create something like a bus stand, they're never going to interact with each other. All of these systems have to be synchronous, and a network has to form for this whole nature taking over visual that we have in our mind. So that's why we're trying to strategize these pods you can everywhere, so that they become a network in themselves. That is what we're trying to show with this plan. This is just a small example near the Purana Kila fort area and the lake. And this is a very hyper-realistic visual of what happens if you allow things to take course on their own. So this is these are just visuals that we all came up with. This is not like an aim. We cannot envision anything, but this is just a plan that something like a seed that we want to grow, that we want that it grows. Yeah. That's basically it. Yeah.
While after placing it over here in this particular parts, what can happen is what we were thinking, that if it would break the fort wall, and then the whole the natural gradient of the land would like all of the seeds would grow in a way and help this whole drain out, and like it doesn't need to go from sideways, and has like would go from in the middle of the fort. So
So is it the trees or the platforms that you are more interested in?
I think it's a process. Like, so the seeds will be like growing, and first you have the platform and this, let's say, traditional structure, but then the nature comes within it. So the tree itself become the architectural proposal. I don't know, like the nature becomes what we are aiming to. So it begins with maybe concrete or wood or these construction materials, but then it come together with a tree.
Yeah.
So it's not one or another, but it's both of them throughout the time.
So are humans the worst species on Earth?
Sorry?
Are humans the worst species on Earth?
No, we're not saying that. We're just saying that it would be nice to all come together.
India Gate and other things were taken over. So how do you privilege human beings, or how do you shelter them or protect them? And what is the scale of time?
The scale of time is varying, sir. And I mean, we don't really envision every monument, and we're not really looking at that kind of point of view, but the idea is we're letting it grow. What if we just let it grow? That's just the idea. And I think it's a scale between 0 to 20 and 0 to 50 years. That's just a...
No. This is minimum 500 years.
Yeah, to that level, yes. To that extent, yes.
So suppose I stood near the wall,
Mhm.
and one peepal tree had started growing into the cracks. And I waited and I waited and I waited 50 years, 100 years, and it may take maybe 100 years for that wall to break open. You know, this large break that you have shown where the water passes through. Unless you are going to cut that wall like that. Are you going to cut it to let the water go through, or what is the real process? So I think you have to do a mock-up of the real tree growing with some degree of faithfulness to that process in order to depict this phenomenon. It, it is something like a your site is how big? The purple areas were quite large, no? Maybe 50 hectares. Yeah. So how many pavilions will you have to build? Each one is about 3 meters by 3 meters or 4 by 4 or something like that. So let's say it is a maximum of 20 square meters. So you will have to build 5,000 or 10,000 such. 10,000 trees will be nothing, but still 10,000 such things. How many people will work? Where will the wood come from? Will you be using waste wood? Where will they stay while they are working? Will there be some of them taking, watering the trees every time for some years? For some years, will there be a team of 500 people from all over India, those who are good at growing trees? Will they be coming here? Will there be a subculture of those people? And why should the purple follow the lines of property? If yes, then in what manner? Why should the purples be on one side of the Purana Kila and not on the other side? Why is there a break between that and the one at the river? And so on. You understand?
Yes.
It is
Yeah.
still like an architect coloring a plan. But it has to be somebody who thinks about organizing the whole thing. Will being on the south and north be different? Suppose the soils turn out to be different. So I think if you draw that pavilion of 4 meters by 4 meters to the same scale as this one, as the plan, and put how many will be there. Yeah? That's a good thing to try.
Yes.
That's a good beginning. Instead of coloring the plan.
Yes, sir.
Is the general desire to move towards the central vista and eat it up, or is the general desire to move towards the river? Or is it both ways? Slowly eat up Delhi.
The central desire was to bring in water inside, and then
No, I'm asking,
yeah.
should we eat up Delhi? You know, he said today, Ashok Vajpayee said that it belongs to nobody. Everybody in Delhi is an outsider. Sudip to Bengal se aaya hai. His father came. Huh? All outsiders. So why should we not finish it? इतनी तकलीफ आती है. मैं दिव्यराज सिंह, आपका नाम जो है एक ट्रेडिशन में से आता है.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, no, I'm not picking on you, sorry. I don't want to do that. But there are many things. The one-dimensional approach to species extinction is an approach which doesn't value life.
I didn't understand.
Yeah. You know, for example, they say, oh, this is an invasive species. Let us remove it. And they cull the species. Yeah. And that's one model of thinking about it. But the tribal doesn't think like that. He invokes another species and he puts 3 or 4 species into a situation. And from there, something else starts happening. So the trees and the humans and the wood for making the platforms and the transport for bringing that wood and all those things are part of the same cycle. And you will have to bring other actors also. You will have to bring, as you brought cows. You will have to bring maybe people also. You know, every year we go and tie a thread around trees. We have all those things. Why not use those also? Why not use the native wisdom also, rather than just new things? That means, how do you connect to the language that is at ground level? Then your pavilion will also look not as neat as it does. There will be a sense of a certain crudity in the making of it, which gives it a certain tactility. When you come near to it, will the wood be absolutely pakka, so that when the monkeys shit on it, it's unpleasant to sit there? Or will it be made in such a way that the rain will wash off the shit? And will it have as clean and plain an edge as it shows here? Or will it be something which is made by hands out of what was found? Because after all, it is the place where the tree is being given the great privilege. Do you understand what I'm saying? What the kind of aesthetic of it that I'm talking about?
Yes.
How big are the trees becoming?
It depends of the species that will seminate in
20
there.
years. You've got 20 years, no, at the bottom here? Yeah. That is how tall. It's a microscopic tree here. In 20 years, a neem will grow 40 feet, 12 meters. So if it is 12 meters, then what a place it will be. So I think that sense of it. You see, if you take a small tree and then keep on expanding it in your computer, then you will never get, that small one will never be of this shape. All these things matter. Okay, let's go to the next group if we can. I think we have said something about this which will already, unless somebody else wants, Vignesh or Sudipto or Gayatri, did we miss out something?
No, sir,
No,
I
Sir, I think
I'm still thinking about it. I think the only the first question you asked, is it about the tree or is it about the platform, is still to my mind unanswered. I think that needs to be thought about a little bit. So I think we can move on to the next. Which group was this? Rana? Which group were you?
Meroli, sir.
Meroli. So you can just go to Slack after Meroli. Meroli is the last one. So Daryaganj. Daryaganj? Yeah.
A minute. Huh?
Vrinda, you're sharing or? You're on mute. You're on mute.
You can go ahead and share, please.
Okay.
Priya, what are you eating? Apple. I just finished one.
So our core idea was this idea of giving the site back to nature and letting it take its course and the natural systems kind of take over human systems. So we had this idea of the Karigar as the Kumhar or the potter, but also Karigar stakeholders that were natural features that could alter the site in some way. So we're looking at earthworms or this play of the river, so land and water, natural pollinators like the birds and the bees. Yeah, and essentially this concept of rewilding the site, of bringing back the forest into the city and bringing back species that Delhi has lost, including sparrows and foxes and vultures and things. So we figured this could come about through the introduction of sacred groves or sanctuaries, and not sanctuaries in the sort of generally understood way of like animal conservation parks, but rather sanctuaries for humans and animals both, where people can go for sort of self-reflection, or where animals can exist freely but also in harmony with humans. Soundarya, if you can scroll down a little, maybe zoom in on the plan some. So this idea, so what we'd done is we had, sorry, not quite so much. Can you zoom out a little? We decided to take the extents of the site to a little sort of further than we were initially introduced to, because we realized that below the Purana Killa area, there's the whole Sundar Nursery complex, and there's Humayun's tomb, and then there's the golf course on the other side. And this is a whole sort of patch of green which could all be connected together and form a series of sacred groves. So we've extended our site all the way down. The two parcels of the sacred grove, so to speak, which are the golf course that's to your left and the Sundar Nursery bit to the right was separated. Whoops, what's going on?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know.
Oh, I think you clicked on the hyperlink. Okay, I see. Never mind. Coming back, are separated by two residential colonies, one of which is Sundar Nagar and the other one is Kaka Nagar. And so to bring the two parcels together, we were proposing having not removing the housing altogether, but rather having a permeable sort of situation where wildlife could cross the boundaries from one to the other, and then to also include the involvement of humans and make humans stakeholders. Um, we had this idea of introducing rituals in introducing rituals into the site. So have actually like pilgrimages of the sacred groves or of the river, where people come in and visit them maybe annually, and in that process have the residents of Sundarnagar, Kakanagar, and then there are some bastis that or like slum areas that are overlooking the river. So have people in those areas host the pilgrims that come in, so that they can actually be involved and want to take care and sort of foster this ecosystem that's coming about. And Saundarya, if you go up to the section. Okay, yeah, the other issue was our file was heavy.
Yeah.
So it'll take a second to load, but if you go to the extreme left side, and I'll just sort of explain that time cycle. So how this ecological rejuvenation happens is over a period of time. So maybe for the first 2 years, it's only ground cover and shrubs and like algae and things like that proliferating, and then slowly from 2 to 8 years, the trees start to come up, and we were introducing this process of mulching throughout the site, where you introduce above the top layer of the soil, you introduce these nutrient-rich sort of decaying materials, so that the earthworms can come back into the picture, and so there will be trees that or seeds that have been submerged for many hundreds of years under the ground will suddenly have the nutrients to start growing through the aeration of the earthworms. And then maybe 8 to 20 years we were looking at the trees coming up to an intermediate state, and then also starting to get inhabited by the wildlife and the animals that were lost. Saundarya, you can start shifting towards the river slowly. And so one of the things we realized was that the root system is a really important part of that. So it was important to show that as well. So that's the Kakanagar housing in section, and that's the Sundarnagar bungalows in section. And then moving further, you get to the sort of core of the sacred grove, where it's the Purana Killa area, where you already have natural water bodies, which we were looking to maintain, but also again reviving the natural ecology and having the water bodies go back to their state with, you know, healthy plant and aquatic life in them. And then there's also Bauli in Purana Killa, so reviving that and conserving the water, which is currently being used to water its lawns, which we're looking at doing away with. So also this idea of heritage and coming across it through the wilderness and experiencing it is almost a surprise. Like one of the examples that I can give you is the so-called discovery of Khajuraho happened when this British officer was going through the forest, and he suddenly came about this bounty of old temple architecture, and he professed to have discovered it, but essentially that sense of discovery is what we're going for. And then that's where the train line comes in. We were considering having, again, tying the community in here is to have langars along the railway line so that the pilgrims that come in can be fed. And then how this landscape sort of starts to go towards the river. So that you can, yeah. And how there's this inflow of the water into the land, and it's a very blurred boundary between the two. So essentially that's what we were going for. But yeah, Sandhya, you want to jump in? You want to add anything? Have I missed something?
I don't think you missed anything, but yeah, so like I think the main idea of mulching was like how it all started and how we didn't want to like intervene in terms of like proposing anything like at large, but rather like just initiating the process so that it takes its own time and pace and then rejuvenates the lost species and things like that.
How much area are you mulching? It is how big? From one bridge to the second bridge, is it 300 meters or something like that? Is it about a kilometer from the river up to that end of the golf course? Is it about that much?
Yes, sir. You have to check exactly, but yeah, I think about.
Yeah. So it will be 1,000 into 500 square meters, right? Yeah. So 500,000 square meters of land have to be mulched with a covering of, let's say, about 5 centimeters. You will need 500,000 into 5 centimeters or 0.05. So you'll need 25,000 cubic meters of mulch every week. Where does it come from? So people are sweeping the fallen leaves, they are mowing their lawns, they're doing all kinds of things. So there will have to be a kind of public spirited activity of bringing the leaves here. So every week maybe 5,000 people will come with the leaves. Also some municipal dumpers will come, etc. Then what will you do? You will have to keep them in bins. 25,000 cubic meters of leaves will have to be kept in bins and watered. And from those bins, you will transfer these things to the land. And you will have wheelbarrows and such things maybe with which you will be taking that stuff. Yeah, so maybe 500 people will be working here. So you will have a huge army of workers. And you will have all this infrastructure required for making that thing work. Will you need to have pathways along which they go?
Yeah.
Huh? At least the wheelbarrow people. Or they can have a donkey, like our traditional potters and all, they have a donkey and they take the donkey along. So you might start with donkeys and move around on the side, but donkeys always make a path, you know. They don't move around anywhere. Even animals don't. They make a path.
A pagdandi.
And they will find the easiest path. They will not climb up and down and all that. If possible, they will walk along at one level. Which also becomes the path of water. because that path will get eroded and the water will move along there and on and on and on. So if you take the real conditions of rewilding into account, then there arises almost an industry at this scale, which is a very wonderful new kind of industry, because there will be byproducts. You will be able to get a whole lot of compost and composting fluid out of it, which now people are willing to pay through their noses to buy. You know, one bottle of that material costs you 50, 100 rupees. It's not cheap. Also, it can be used for pesticide also, the same thing. So now if this thing is to pay for itself, then it will need to have all these cyclical economies that were being talked about. Now you've got the people who make the sacred groves. So what defines a sacred grove? How do you know that the sacred grove has started and it has ended? Wherever I've seen them, there is always grassland around. And the moment you cross through the grass and you reach that place where the trees start, the density and the sound of the crickets in the dark forest suddenly begins to become very, very strong. This is quite fantastic, actually. Yeah. So you will find that there will be zones of much compaction of trees and lianas and ground cover and snakes and all that. Yeah. Now, those people who come from Northeast, come from Karnataka, come from Himachal Pradesh to worship at these groves, where will they stay? You said they will be hosted. Where are those hosts?
So they'll either be in Kakanagar and Sundarnagar or along the river banks just under the power plant is where the two buses.
Where are they on your plan?
Sandhya, will you just, can I annotate? Yeah. Yeah. So that's Kakanagar. That's Sundarnagar.
It's not like, what do you call it? Homestay. Or it's not like B&B. What is it? What is it? This new thing?
Airbnb.
Airbnb. It's not an Airbnb. Nobody wants that stranger to come into their house. So they build the dharamshala and they give the dharamshala for use and they go and serve them. They go and do things for them. They maybe have at night they have a entertainment program, bhajans or something. But you will have to make those places, and there will, if there are 1,000 coming, there will be at least 100. Where will they stay? What is that? What you call basti? They are humans. They are living here, and they form a settlement. What about the langars? Will there not be kitchens? Where will the food come from? Will there be vegetable gardens? Will there be something grown here as part of this whole thing? And some will come from outside. Where will the trucks come which bring all that stuff? You know, if you see a langar where every day 500 people are eating, then the store of that is huge. I have designed one where there were 6 bins, each of 3 meters by 3 meters of 3 meters, 2 containing meat, 2 containing rice, 2 containing dal. This is the kind of, and you've seen at Srirangam the size of those granaries, huge. This is the way to host. Huh? Then there is a kind of a human presence here. Now humans shit. They have to, There is no way they can avoid peeing and shitting. What happens to all that? So you got to get all the cycles into this drawing. Not throwing away the drawing, but making the paths, making the way in which it will be kept working well. Because this is one bit of a wilderness that will take 50 years to come to its full, what is it called? Peak stage, or there is some word for that, no? So that will happen. Now, one last thing, on that section, your trees are too small.
Okay.
Draw as if you are there. Keep a scale in your hand. If you are drawing on the computer, make sure you measure from time to time. Then it will hold conviction. When you have thought of all these things, it will be something which cannot be assailed. That even if it is a pipe dream to make so much of Delhi into a forest, still you have to respect that you came up with all the backup for it. That has to be done. And that has to be done at schematic stage, because that is simple calculations. About that. Huh? And those calculations, once done, they can be put away. Then the next team can work with that. You understand? Yeah?
Yes.
The others might want to say things.
Oh, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah. So we were a little inquisitive. Like Kaka Nagar was a little inquisitive to know which is the core value you all picked from our text, and like how did you all interpret it to get to like mulching?
So we essentially looked at the dialogue that the tree, the air, the monkey, and the river were having, and then we sort of had dialogues with each other from the perspective of all these stakeholders, and then that's where we came up with this idea of having stakeholder karigars. And then of the discussions that we have, I think the ideas that stuck were these. So with your conversation between the monkey and the tree particularly, and sort of the other animals, and the dogs and things that you were talking about, of like, eating ice cream from the vendors and things like that, we realized we wanted this ecosystem of trees and forests, and then that's how this came about. And then we were like, how do we prompt this to happen within the city? And then so Daria came up with a really great idea of earthworm. So when we were role playing, I think she picked up earthworm, and then that's where like that germ of an idea started from.
It's wonderful how an idea goes and becomes transformed somewhere. So nice. Yeah.
Vrinda, I think you can show that the derivation that you had done, just that one part of the different colors, no?
Okay, hang on, let me see something.
This one?
Oh, sorry, just take that off.
Since we are talking about this, Vrinda, do you think we should ask them what the yellow is finally?
What is the yellow, guys? Can you please tell us? We couldn't figure it out.
No, it's a game of Chinese whispers. You can't come back to it.
Very clever, Divya, very clever. Hiding behind immunity, legal immunity.
This is
You guys
what we
had
concluded as.
part of your section had had a moment where seeds were in the ground for years and years, right, waiting to germinate. Wasn't that there in the beginning, in the initial cycles?
No, that actually was prompted by a discussion with Chaya sir, where he was telling us about how the way to prompt, he said rather than arbitrarily plant things in certain places, we should use the seeds that are already embedded in the ground and that are dormant at the moment, that have been there for like 500 years. And he said the way to activate them is to actually mulch it. So that's where the idea of mulching came from.
Is there also
something that has happened at Alua?
Yeah.
Because we had a landscape consultant, but another landscape consultant told us that you are mad. You can never plant this site, it's too big and you will never be able to take care of everything. Just build a fence and stop the grazing and let the leaves keep on falling. See in 5 years what happens. And he was right. Everything is growing like mad and things are coming out. That's what I shared with them.
But you're now also thinking of growing food. Because I overheard, sorry, I was out for a bit. But the growing of food and the growing of food and the seeds that grow food, and that seed which is required for growing food, and how that seed is also kind of transforming at an alarming rate into something modified and transformed and so on. And the sense of this preservation of seeds underground is a beautiful one. It's almost like you can really create a bank for the future, and it's already been created by somebody. I thought that's an idea that one can almost preserve food seeds. I mean, whatever the seeds might be.
Yeah, this of the food. There are many experiments of organic gardening where they don't separate out the seeds into different sections. Like this is wheat and that is rice, and they plant them in different beds, but they mix up all the seeds and just throw them onto the ground. And they have found that the actual crop that they get is almost the same if you had done it in a sort of more systematic manner. Sometimes more even. Certainly it is more tasty, and the pests find it very difficult to attack because all the wheat is not available in one go. I mean, they have to go from one stem to another, which might be far away. Everything is intermixed. And this is a new form of organic farming, which I think all those who are working with green should remember that it's not just trees. The important thing are the grasses. Do not forget the grasses.
That in Oroville and Sondaria would know, in Satna forest, where there was absolutely no water and they were trying to forest this entire arid landscape, desert landscape. The one thing that they found was, of course, to ensure that no moisture was lost from the soil. But one way of doing it was to plant the grasses around the roots of the trees, and not just grasses, but shrubs, thorny shrubs, bushes, different kinds. And you create what is called in Hindi a jhurmut. And in that jhurmut is the actual home of insect and reptilian life. And that also creates its own ecology right at the foot of the tree, and creating this a space where evaporation is protected, but also small animals and insects and birds are they find habitation underneath in the undergrowth. So the undergrowth is also so important.
Yes. So brass tacks is the advice. Huh? Practical manner of achieving this.
Shall we go to the next group?
Yep.
Got Dholakwa after this.
It's our turn, sorry. Good luck.
Dholakwa. We are going alphabetically.
Okay.
Niroli was the last one which started, and then we went to the first one, which was Daryaganj.
Yes, yes, I would be presenting just a minute.
After Dholakwa, we've got Kakanagar. Okay,
So, Jumanapur, a pilgrimage across the Yamuna. It is a journey, not a destination. To tread upon the river, pursue its truth. Where does it take you? It's all on you. It welcomes all. What happens here? The farmer gets land to cultivate. The devotees reclaim the water. Thus the river becomes holy once more. The cattle get to graze. The people move through the place. Though they are there for but a short time, the world belongs to them, and yet it is not theirs to keep. For they are not one, no individual, no man, no child. They are the all, the collective, the people. And they make the place as the place makes them. And so today we'll present to you our project called Poles Apart. And it's a project that begins with the idea of connecting to another place. As we looked at the sites on the west side of the Yamuna, we felt like there was a border that was keeping us from crossing the river. And so much so that it's interesting that people will have the urge to vegetate the west, while as we look just a bit east across the river, there is the national forest. And there is a forest that seems so far away to us because we won't look past the river. And so what if there was something that made you cross the river on a daily basis? What if there was an architecture that made this journey a daily thing? And so from the core values that we received from the group before us, the core values that we could reduce from their document was temporality, connection to nature, and empathy. And from there, we began to map what was going on in our mind. A very key idea that we had was a sacred space in the city. We felt that all of the core values somehow surrounded this idea of sacredness, spirituality, connection. And from there, we diverged into two different ways, places of spirituality and places of sacredness. An idea that came to mind was the ashram. And looking at Sabarmati ashram, Gandhi ashram, and seeing what the traditional ashram has, what the traditional ashram gives, and what makes it up. And so part of that was also understanding that for the traditional ashram, the guru is very important. And so what does that mean for the contemporary ashram? As we sought to make an ashram or something like an ashram for the city of Delhi. And so from there, we can go to the next page. We began to collage our ideas. It was really nice to be able to collage together on the Miro board. That was one of the most fantastic things about this group project, because the collage is really our way of having everyone have a voice, because sometimes people won't speak as loud as another, but the idea is that the image will say everything that you need to say. And if they can touch each other, if they can connect, if they can intrude each other, that is how we start to begin to form our own singular idea as a group. And so the collage represents going from the west side, crossing the river in the middle, and transferring to the east side. And on the west side, we start at an existing building that's no longer in use, the power plant. And we took the architecture of the power plant and said, let's take this existing building and turn that into half of the ashram. And let's make people cross the river and reach the other half of the ashram, which is located on the east side in the national forest. And so the idea is that the ashram is not in one place, but in two. And to understand what the ashram can give a person in terms of spiritual journey or enlightenment is that it has to take place in between these two poles. And that's what we call poles apart. And so the next page. So we were working between many different things, going back and forth with idea to ground level with the feet on the ground. And so we began with who, what, where, when, and why. With the who, we were talking about people in need, migrants, people who want to give to people in need, not just people, but also other species that coexist with each other. The people of Delhi, the people of India. The contemporary ashram has to be a place not only for a certain group or a certain age group, but the contemporariness has to engage with the city as it is now. What we decided that as the core values spoke a lot about circularity and circular ecology and something that we're trying to achieve right now, we thought that the ashram made sense the way that everyday life becomes one's whole life. The way that if you are in an ashram, you provide for one another. One person cleans the bathrooms, another person cooks, another person plants, another person has the opportunity to sit and read. And that's how you coexist together because you all have a certain duty. And what also includes the journey. With the site, we equally found it challenging to deal with the site. We found it challenging to pick a site and to feel connected to one. And so what we ended up going in was a direction that was expanding the site to be a path rather than a plot of land per se. And so then we thought, how do you define a path? How do you define a line? Well, it's defined by the two ends, the two dots that sit on the end. And so that's how the two halves of the ashram came about, as two different nodes that would seek to form the pilgrimage in between. And we worked on designing the pilgrimage in between. And so the journey across the Yamuna is, we thought maybe you could walk, maybe you could walk across the Sabarmati when the water is low, but we figured out that the Yamuna is actually 60 feet deep, so probably not. But then we also thought, do we build another bridge? Do we build a bridge for autos or for people, or do we build a bridge on top of the existing bridge? What are other ways? Rafts, can we make rafts? Can we have boats? Can we make people engage with actually having to cross the river? And when? Part of this, after discussing with Chaya sir, was like, how can we imagine ourselves actually being on this journey? What makes people interact with the ashram? And so the idea came to mind that if you wake up on the west side, you must cross the river at any point during the day to stay on the east side. But if you wake up on the east side, you must cross the river to stay on the west side. So you can only stay at the ashram in these places if you cross the river, if you're coming from another side. And every day that you wake up, part of your day is to cross the river again. And this sort of awareness is the type of thing that we're hoping will encourage people who take this journey to see the river as it is. Is it really difficult to cross because it's so dirty? Is it scary to cross because you don't want to fall into that water? And so maybe this will inspire people to start to clean the river. Yeah, and that's the why. And so if we go to the next page. We began with a program diagram that was about cyclical things. We started with many different circles that were not connected, and realized that these circles could touch each other and that they could overlap. And so, for instance, there is a cycle of education with different education that happens. And so education for animals also talks about the animal space, the shelter for animals that we're trying to provide. And that circle connects to food recycling and the idea of substance and the food eating and the food processing and the planting. Other connections are the river. We're saying that people should cross the river and build boats and take boats. So part of the architecture is creating a storage for these boats, creating a workshop for these boats, creating a place to rest after making the boats, and also creating a recycling center. That's also another idea that came to mind, that you know, it's not a single process to make these boats, but that the boats will be recycled into the next buildings that are built. And yes, so lots of cycles, a program that connect to each other. It was really important to us to engage with the East Side, which many Delhi citizens call Jamunapur, which you probably know better than me means Jamuna across, or and it's this idea that after some discussions with professors and tutors, that the East Side is a place that feels more far away than it physically is, because there's this idea that we're all looking towards Central Vista, we're all looking towards that side, we're all looking to the West Side, but there is an entire part of Delhi that sits on the East Side that is not being connected. And because we can't look past the Yamuna, maybe we can't even look at the Yamuna. And so, furthermore, on the next page, we worked in different scales of drawings. We worked in a site plan, talking about the site plan, talking about the landscape as it sits before we start to even build any architecture on top. And then going into the power plant in a different scale. And seeing how our program cycles fit into the existing power plant. The plan drawing of the power plant is called The Ashram as the City. It takes reference to another drawing called The House as the City. And so the drawing is it's mimicking the neighborhoods of Delhi that are, apart from the Central Vista, are chaotic, are beautiful because they're chaotic, but have a certain rhythm to them. And the interior spaces of this plan now represent the nuances of the city. Another person posted on the library a question about streets in the city, and I found it really interesting to think about. There's many theoreticians that say that within the city, chaos and nuisance and incredible things can happen because somehow buildings become our new natural environment. And so the streets now become the corridors, the buildings now become the furniture, and we can look at the city as sort of a metaphor for a different scale of understanding, but somehow neutralizing our coexistence within this chaos. And so the next page. We talked again about how the renovation of the power plant functions as a way to engage with the west side of the city of Delhi and a sacred place within the city. We sought to, again, talk about the chaos of the nature of the city of Delhi, and to say that our answer to the alter ego of the Central Vista is that this chaos also is a part of Delhi as much as anything else. And that has to be represented in a proper way, in a formal way. And on the east side, this idea also came about that as people arrive to the east side into this forest reserve, that people will begin to make new buildings, that people will begin to use the recycled materials to make pavilions and rooms and spaces, but also forge a path, forge a corridor, which is you know, a response to the Central Vista is one way of saying a path or a street. And then the path that people create by just walking into the forest and going around the trees is another type of path. And that's a response to the straight line path. Next page. Again, we went back to the plan, we went back to the section, trying to work and see how everything interacts with each other. Next page. And last of all, which we didn't get into too much, but materiality. The idea that a lot of the material will be recycled. That was one of the core values we received as well. And we researched into what trash comes from the Yamuna, what can be recycled from cleaning the river, what we can recycle from the life that these people will live inside the ashram, and how we can recycle that into building materials. And so that's the part of this project that is incomplete, which was also a core value, and not a way of evading the point, but just a way of really hitting the mark. Yes, and that is it. I don't know if anyone else from the group wants to say anything or add anything, but thank you for listening.
How many people will there be in the ashram or ashrams?
Perhaps a few thousand.
What is the ideal size of an ashram? I mean, the people who are on a retreat, they want to be quiet, they want to be reflective, they want to be away from. So, the group size should not become a size which is like a cult. If you have 5,000 people sitting, then it's a cult. So the ashram will be of not more than 100 people at any one time, each. Now, if they are all put side by side, then you will get another kind of thing of a ashram district, which also is a terrible thing to have. So there must be so many other people. It must be within the network of villages. We will need to have other people. Just as in Auroville, and you can talk to Saundarya about this, you have all these villages which do all kinds of things. Like you can get wonderful things in the villages. So, and it is interspersed. So if their ashram is an area of Delhi in which some of these people who wanted to make a retreat were able to come to an agreement with the village for some of the land to be used. What I'm getting at, Anna, is scale. The very big has to be tamed here to the scale of such conversations where everybody can remember each other's names. Keep that as your control. That otherwise it becomes anonymity. Yeah? So if that is the case, then these circles become tiny circles all over the place. Then the question is, how does that power station structure, which is huge in scale, get cannibalized or reused? And you have another very interesting scale condition. especially because you are talking about also the need for nature to be next to you. So you got a major breakthrough there. And then on the other side, will you take half the power station to the other side and build with that? So that's something. Then, how many boats will you need? And will the villagers also be the majis, the boatmen who sing? Will they create their own singing group, which once in a while entertains maybe hundreds of people or thousands? So I think you have to now, all the concepts are fine, but you have to realize them in scale. And the major issue of scale is not being lost in a multitude. That is your scale. For both those who are permanently living there and those who come to the ashram. Okay. That's what I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense. Certainly.
You know, one boat, how many people can sit? What would you recommend? It's like that goat, tiger, and grass problem. Because you said they'll have to go every day to the other side, live on that side, then come back every next day. So they'll be doing that. And you said there are thousands of people. And I would say they won't more than 2 or 3 to a boat. So there will be boats flying across all the time. Because if you have even 1,000, let alone 2 or 3, but 1,000 if you have, you will need 300 to 500 journeys across, which may take place at different times, but everyone will want to go in the morning or in the evening. So there will be boat regattas going across. How do you feel about that? And how will you make this in a way in which the whole thing works as if nobody knows that there is this going on, that there are retreats? You know, this morning there was a question about the spaces which will be silent and which are secret, which no one knows about. He said that they are part of the city. In Hindi was saying that these are the spaces which must not be forgotten in a city. So you have to make this thing invisible. Whatever you are doing has to melt into, so it has to have a camouflage of a certain kind. So it's a very interesting problem then.
Yes, I've never done that before with the building.
Professor Chaya, if we take up, if we start a little early tomorrow at say 9.
Yeah, I'm fine. Even if you
Kotla,
wanted earlier than that, I'm okay with that.
So Kotla, would you like to start at, let's say, 8:30? Would that be more convenient?
At what, sorry?
8:30.
India time?
8:30 would be better for us.
8:30 India time then. We start at 8:30. Is that okay with the rest of Kotla people? Yeah, okay. And there are there's more attrition happening for certain groups. Particularly, Majnu Katila has been voicing their concern because they're now reduced to 3 people.
Oh.
So that's a bit of a. So we'll have to kind of speak a little bit about how they can manage this.
Let's wait till tomorrow.
Yeah.
Then maybe they can join other boats. There are many boats crossing. No?
Yeah.
Maybe we can invite some animals and trees to join the. Now that the humans are leaving.
क्या ह्यूमंस को निकालने की कोशिश की ना ये लोग ने, इसीलिए ये सब हो रहा है.
थोड़ा फ्लोरा फौना को बुलाते हैं इधर-उधर से.
Okay, so we start at 8:30
Yes.
tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Okay. See you guys.